Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. We begin today at the International Criminal Court, where a Ugandan former child soldier who later became a commander of the rebel Lord's Resistance Army has been sentenced to 25 years in jail. Dominic Ongwen, known as White Ant, was convicted in February of more than 60 crimes, including murder, torture, rape and sexual enslavement. Prosecutors had argued that Mr. Ongwen should receive a lower prison term because he had been abducted by the LRA as a child. The rebel movement was formed more than 30 years ago, operating in Uganda and in neighboring countries.
However, it is also confronted with a perpetrator who himself had previously endured extreme suffering himself at the hands of the group of which he later became a prominent member and leader. By no means does Dominic Ongwen's personal background overshadow his culpable conduct and the suffering of the victims. It is worth repeating this again. Nevertheless, the specificity of this case, of his history, of his situation, cannot be put aside in deciding whether he must be sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes.
Let's get more on this story from former ICC prosecutor Charles Adeogun Phillips. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. What do you make of the ICC judgment handed down to Dominic Ongwen?
Well, in the first instance, the point has to be made that Ongwen himself was charged with some of the most severe offenses known to mankind, and this included sexual enslavement, rapes, and murders. The trial chamber, in sentencing him to 25 years, which is a significant sentence and reflective of his culpable conduct, would have been faced with two issues. The first, of course, would have been the severity of the crimes upon which he had been convicted. But on the other hand, the trial chamber would have been quite passionately moved by the fact that he himself had been a child soldier when he was recruited into the Lord's Resistance Army several years ago, and in that regard had suffered some element of brutality himself as a child soldier. So on the one hand, the trial chamber would have been confronted with the brutality with which he had acted in perpetrating those crimes as a commander. But of course, those acts would have been somewhat mitigated by his own personal experience as a child soldier.
It's believed that Mr. Ongwen received a lower prison term because he was abducted by the LRA as a child. But can this judgment give closure to his victims, or should there be calls for more compensation?
Well, in terms of the sentence that he received, that of 25 years, which is quite substantial. I mean, of course, the maximum would have been a sentence in the range of 30 years. I'm also aware that my colleagues had requested 20 years and the defense had requested 10 years. In between, the trial chamber would have found that 25 years was reflective of his culpability for the crimes, and 25 years means 25 years in the international context. Of course, that may have been mitigated slightly by the factors that surround his own personal experience, having been recruited as a child soldier. But clearly, upon a conviction for 61 counts for offenses ranging from rape to sexual enslavement to murder as crimes against humanity, I'm not terribly surprised that someone who was in a position of command would be sentenced to 25 years. He could well have gotten more than that, but 25 years is to my mind, reflective of his culpable conduct.
You know, some people believe that Ongwen should have been sent home to Uganda to face trial and not the ICC. They argue that his ICC trial was a proxy prosecution of Joseph Kony, the fugitive LRA leader. What's your thoughts on this?
In terms of the fact that he was prosecuted at the ICC, well, Uganda is a state party to the ICC. Uganda had in fact surrendered and referred, rather, this situation voluntarily to the ICC in 2003, I think it was, or 2004. I do not accept that he was a proxy for Joseph Kony, who is still at large, and clearly efforts have still been made to track Joseph Kony down. But I think that the jurisdiction of the ICC was well triggered in the fact that Uganda actually submitted voluntarily this situation to the jurisdiction of the court, and therefore the court, both in terms of its temporal and subject matter jurisdiction, was well placed to take on the trial.
All right, then, former ICC prosecutor, Mr. Charles Adeogun Phillips, thank you so much for your thoughts on this. Moving on now, Ethiopia's lower house of parliament has approved a resolution by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's cabinet designating the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front and the Oromo Liberation Army as terrorist organizations. The TPLF, dominant in Ethiopian politics for 3 decades until 2018, has been fighting with the federal government since November in Tigray state. Authorities often accuse OLF of being behind attacks that target ethnic Amhara and other minorities living in the largest Oromia state. The move comes a month before Ethiopia's national elections. Meanwhile, the Ethiopian government has appointed Dr. Abraham Bile as chief executive of the interim administration of the troubled state of Tigray. Dr. Abraham is the current president of the ruling Prosperity Party and also serves as Minister of Innovation and Technology. He replaces Dr. Mulu Niga, who took up the post on November the 15th, 2020, shortly after a military operation in the Tigray region to oust officials from the former ruling Tigray People's Liberation Front. The TPLF has since been designated a terrorist organization. Some of its key leaders and forces have been arrested, while others are said to be on the run as an insurgency persists in remote parts of Tigray. Dr. Abraham's appointment comes as the federal government plans to launch an inclusive national dialogue to end the political and humanitarian crisis in the troubled region. The authorities have also pledged to increase security and humanitarian access as allegations of attacks linked to federal and Eritrean forces continue to be reported. Still in Ethiopia, the United Nations says the security situation in Tigray remains unpredictable and volatile. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric adds that COVID-19 cases have been reported amongst displaced people in Mekelle who are living in cramped conditions.
Turning to Ethiopia, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that the security situation in Tigray remains unpredictable and volatile, with active hostilities impeding the scale-up of operations in rural areas. The cases of COVID-19 have been reported among displaced people in Mekelle who are living in cramped conditions with insufficient isolation centers to mitigate a large-scale outbreak. Health challenges, including the lack of essential medicine and medical equipment, including oxygen cylinders and Shire, as well as the fuel shortages for ambulance services. Despite these challenges, humanitarian partners continue to try to reach all of the people that need help in Tigray. As of April 29th, the government and the World Food Program had distributed more than 19,000 metric tons of food, reaching 1.1 million people in 35 districts in the region. Last week, an interagency humanitarian convoy reached Samre and Gijet towns in the southeastern zone of Tigray and delivered emergency food, nutrition supplies, as well as non-food items. A health clinic was also set up in Samre Hospital, which remains dysfunctional.
In South Africa, the suspended Secretary General of the ANC, Ace Magashule, has hit back by seeking to suspend President Cyril Ramaphosa as president of the party. The Deputy Secretary General of the party, Jesse Duarte, however, says Mr. Magashule has no authority to issue the president with a suspension letter and cannot do so on his own without the party's backing. Mr. Magashule says he's appealing against the unconstitutional decision to suspend him from the party and will remain in position until his appeal is determined. The ANC suspended him on Wednesday and warned that other party members charged with corruption would face the same fate if they do not resign within 30 days. Let's get more on this story from our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia. Betty, funny turn of events. How are South Africans reacting to this drama in the ANC?
Well, apart from those grabbing their popcorn and drinks, watching how things unfold, people are quite worried about the way things are going. But then again, we've heard the rumblings behind the scenes, so it's no surprise. They knew that at some point it's going to come to a head or come to the surface. And remember, next year is the elected conference of the party, so a lot of the friction will surface even more at this time. But it's also bad timing for the party because this year is local government elections. The last local government elections, which comes every 5 years, the party suffered a lot of loss, and the new kids on the block, that's the economic freedom fighters, gave them a run for their money by forming coalitions with the opposition party, making the party lose 3 metropolitan cities in 2016. So we're watching to see how it goes. The National Executive Committee of the party will be meeting at the weekend to talk about these issues that are coming up. They're quite embarrassed. People have described it in so many words. And President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his own words, said he's shocked and dismayed at what's going on.
Yeah, you know, Mr. Magashule is insisting that he will remain in position until his appeal is determined. But how will this work?
It's not working because the party has come out to say, after his statement late last night on suspending his suspension, to quote his words, and suspending the president, the party gave another statement saying that the decision of the party regarding his suspension still stands. But then there's so many loopholes. He knew that, or he knows that he has no power, unilateral power to suspend the president, but I guess it helps to muddy the water and hype up the tension. But that NEC meeting at the weekend, the executive committee meeting at the weekend, is going to be quite hectic, and all eyes will be on that meeting to find out, because they said they're going to iron these issues that have come up out. So we want to know what's going to come out of that meeting. But you would want to be a flower on the wall, at the closed door session.
All right, then, Betty, a lot to keep our eyes on. We'll be getting our popcorns as well. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, in partnership with the Yobe state government, has flagged off an awareness on micro, small and medium enterprises registration and product addition to 1,000 low-income earners. Northeast Zonal Director mentioned this in Damaturu, the state capital, adding that the effort was part of the federal government's recovery process for the victims of insurgency to get their local products registered.
For over a decade, many people have been displaced from their ancestral homes in northeastern region of the country by Boko Haram. Their livelihood destroyed, leaving them solely depending on humanitarian assistance from governments and non-governmental organizations. To bring succor to these victims, the federal government is creating awareness on registration and product addition for local businessmen and women in Yobe State.
You have to contribute by bringing smaller ones to become bigger ones. So with the federal government palliative of registration of ease of doing business, NAFDAC is a key driver in the SMSA business registration.
Director of Veterinary Medicine and Allied Products of the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, Dr. Bukar Usman, as well as other delegates, inspect some of the locally produced products at the center.
Our expectation is that we'll have increase in number of those people who are going into value addition, who are going into processing of this product, who will add value, and this will have a lot of multiplier effect on the individual families, on the economy of the communities, and also the Yobe state as a whole.
While commending NAFDAC for the initiative, the Yobe state government seeks more for displaced persons towards recovery process and self-reliance.
One of our major problems is that whenever you have this type of products, they don't have enough markets. They are not being bought outside the state. So the state government partner with NAFDAC, so that at least we can get them registered, they will have market nationally and internationally.
The beneficiaries, who are mainly women and youths, were drawn across the 17 local government councils of the state.
Some update on the COVID-19 pandemic now. Researchers in Kenya have detected 5 cases of the Indian COVID-19 variant in the country. The health ministry says the tests were done before the ban on flights to India was imposed. The country suspended passenger flights to India 2 weeks ago. The 5 cases were identified from samples collected in people working in a fertilizer plant in western Kenya. India is currently experiencing the worst COVID-19 surge in the world, with hundreds of thousands of new cases being reported every day. Well, Kenyan journalist Abby Agina joins us now live on the program to tell us more about this. Abby, how are Kenyans reacting to the discovery of the Indian COVID-19 variant in the country?
Well, thank you for having me on the program. It is a matter that has gripped national attention in the country. Leaders from Nyanza region, that is in outside Nairobi, that is in Kisumu, leaders from Nyanza region had a press conference today where they called on government to step up efforts towards securing and ensuring vaccination continues, especially in Kisumu, now that we've seen a number of cases that have been reported. The leaders also called on the Ministry of Health to ensure that all the hospitals across the country are on high alert to ensure all Kenyans are safeguarded against the spread of this variant from India.
Yeah, you know, the country just banned flights from India about 2 weeks ago. But do we know what other measures the government will take to prevent the spread of this very dangerous variant?
Well, what you can report as of now is that the government, over and above banning flights from India, has also put in measures in place to repatriate Kenyans who could be students, Kenyan businessmen in India. And under this arrangement, they'll be contained under a quarantine program to ensure that any Kenyan that is in the diaspora that is working or living in India is in the country as the pandemic continues to surge in India. We also do know that the government has been pushing for the vaccine to be brought in, because right now Kenya was depending on the AstraZeneca from India. Right now the government has confirmed that it will be importing Johnson & Johnson vaccine as well as the Pfizer vaccine. All this will be to ensure that the vaccination exercise is not heavily affected. Those are some of the mitigation measures that the government has instituted to ensure that they are on top of the game when it comes to handling the pandemic.
All right, then, Kenyan journalist Abby Agina, thank you so much for bringing us an update on the situation in Nairobi. Thank you. Well, now let's take you to Algeria, where a charity has taken over a restaurant to serve free and fancy Ramadan meals. Using the facilities of a restaurant, the charity offers the service throughout the holy month of Ramadan to help people in need. Take a look.
Set up in Algiers, Dar El Malouk restaurant that is lent to the association free of charge
Chef Redone, who works in a multinational company, comes in on a daily basis with other volunteers to cook hot dishes with what he says are quality ingredients.
We are here to satisfy others. We want people to feel comfortable. It's like a restaurant. Some people can't afford restaurants in their daily lives, so at least when they come here once a year, they feel comfortable. We serve them, they eat whatever they want, and we top up for those who want more. Thank God.
Serving 250 dishes per day to people in need and those who work away from home. The Insane Association strives to create the atmosphere of a fancy restaurant.
This is a voluntary initiative. We made this beautiful dish, you can see, especially to make people feel like they're in a real restaurant with real dishes. People nowadays can't afford a delicious couscous meal with all these quality ingredients. As you can see, we made it with plums and raisins.
The warm atmosphere created by the Insane Association attracts many.
We came here and liked the food. We really feel at home. The food is good and they treat us well. We thank them for this initiative and have a good Ramadan.
The association is active all year round and also collects monetary and kind donations to distribute basic food staples during the holy month of Ramadan.
A little help goes a long way. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shuboale. Bye for now.